Good morning, everyone. My name is Jake Zatzkin, and I'll be your facilitator this morning, as well as moderating our chat panel for any questions that may come up during our webinar. I'm joined by my colleague, Joe Goodwin, who will be walking us through our material today. So welcome to Investigate, Mitigate, and Respond 101. Don't wake up to a ransomware attack. So Joe, it sounds like we're talking about ransomware today.
Correct. Good morning, everybody. So successful ransomware attacks have the potential to completely paralyze business and government network operations, steal data, and force victims into a choice between either paying off their attackers or losing their data forever. So this webinar is designed to help you understand ransomware attacks and provide steps that individuals and organizations can take to reduce that risk of attack, to mitigate the potential damage, and to respond effectively if a ransomware attack does occur.
Okay, Joe, but so what about ransomware can we expect to learn over the next hour?
In this overview, we'll cover the essential information you need to protect yourself and your organization using the Identify, Mitigate, and Recover framework. So first, we'll identify the signs of an attack and methods of the infection, mitigate the threat through proper cyber hygiene and incident response planning, and response and recovery according to your plan. In the second half of the course, we'll apply this framework to some real-world case studies of documented ransomware attacks. As we dive in, let's start by looking at some numbers that illustrate how destructive these potential attacks could be. Ransomware attacks cost businesses more than $7.5 billion per year, with the FBI reporting ransom payments alone totaling around $1 billion. Recovering from ransomware attacks costs businesses over $84,000 on average, and the rate of these attacks are increasing. The cybersecurity company McAfee reports a 56% growth in ransomware activity between 2018 and 2019. Ransomware makes up a significant share of global cybercrime, which are estimated to grow beyond $6 trillion by 2021.
So, Joe, that sounds like a significant uptick, and it sounds like ransomware causes a lot of damage, but what is it exactly?
So we'll start with the basics on ransomware, what it is, and then get some of the more specifics. So ransomware is a type of malicious software, otherwise known as a malware, that's designed to block legitimate users' access to a computer system or their data through encryption until a ransom is paid. This typically spreads through phishing emails or by victims unknowingly visited an infected website. Ransomware variants have been observed for several years and often attempt to extort money from victims by displaying an on-screen ransom note alert. Typically, these alerts state that the system has been locked or that the computer or network's files have been encrypted. The users are told that unless a ransom is paid, the files will be lost forever. The ransom demanded from individuals varies a lot, but is generally in the hundreds of dollars and usually must be paid in virtual currency, such as Bitcoin. Ransomware is one of the most significant cybersecurity risks playing out across our nation's networks. Many attacks go unreported, and ransoms are paid as an attempt to just make the problems go away quickly so that business can resume. However, this rewards cybercriminals and simply perpetuates the vicious ransomware cycle. Ransomware must be considered a destructive attack and addressed as if it were a physical attack upon your organization or your facilities. So let's look at a very brief history of ransomware. The first reported ransomware attack was a virus created by an evolutionary biologist named Joseph Popp in 1989. The AIDS Trojan was disseminated via a floppy disk given to over 20,000 attendees of the World Health Organization's AIDS conference. The disks were labeled, quote, AIDS information, introductory diskettes. The program would hide file directories and encrypt or lock the file names. To regain access, the users would have to send $189 to PC Cyborg Corporation at a P.O. box in Panama. The AIDS Trojan was easy to overcome as it used simple symmetric cryptography and tools that were soon available to decrypt those files. 7 years later, in '96, researchers introduced a proof of concept for the kidnapping of data utilizing public key cryptography. Then in the late 2000s, I saw a boom in ransomware technology with advanced encryption, followed by the introduction of Bitcoin ransom demands in 2013, and then attacks designed for data destruction in 2017. More alarming, ransomware variants began to target widespread vulnerabilities based on hardware and software products, such as the WannaCry ransomware outbreak that used the infamous Windows Eternal Blue exploit to infect hundreds of thousands of computers and networks in hundreds of countries.
Joe, that's actually really interesting, especially about the AIDS Trojan. My wife went to an EU conference for setting their digital agenda in 2010, and she was laughing afterwards, telling me about how they gave out unsecured jump drives to everyone with the slides from the conference. And she kept saying that nobody attending that conference would ever put something like that into their machines, and now I guess I understand what she meant.
Absolutely. We've come a long way in awareness of our cyber hygiene in situations like that. So while there are now a multitude of ransomware variants, generally speaking, ransomware follows a consistent pattern. It infects your system, it encrypts your data, and then it extorts you for payment to undo the infection. Ransomware is often spread by victims opening phishing emails, as stated earlier, that contain malicious attachments, or through drive-by downloading. Drive-by downloading occurs when a user unknowingly visits an infected website where malware is downloaded and installed without the user's knowledge. Once introduced into your system, the malware can do a variety of things. It can lock access to your computer or mobile devices, preventing you from going past the login screen. It can block network access, preventing an organization's employees from accessing enterprise files and applications and compromising the network's data. It can also simply block access to specific files within the directory on your standalone computer. Attackers will then prompt you to make payment, typically in virtual currency, in order to unlock your system and get you back to normal ops. Some threat actors threaten to sell the stolen data unless a ransom is paid. However, paying ransom is discouraged as it only incentivizes more bad behavior. And in many cases, the systems are not decrypted when with the attackers only asking for more money. So who's susceptible? Every individual, every company, every agency who uses a computer or mobile device that touches the internet is vulnerable to a ransomware attack. Anyone with important data stored on their computer is at risk, including government and law enforcement agencies, healthcare systems, and other critical infrastructure. Recovery can be a difficult process requiring the services of a reputable data recovery specialist, and some victims do pay a ransom to recover their files. However, as stated before, it can't be emphasized enough that there's no guarantee the individuals will recover their files if they pay. So it not only targets individual users, but targets his business as well, with the goal of extorting larger payouts. The common consequences to businesses that fall victim include loss of sensitive or proprietary information, disruption to their operations, financial losses incurred from loss of business operations and the cost to restore the systems, and simply harm to an organization's reputation. The most commonly targeted sectors are, starting with the most targeted, education, federal, state, and local government agencies, healthcare, energy and utilities, retail, and finance. Just for some context on the economic impact that these sectors represent, the top three sectors, education, government, and healthcare, make up over 20% of the 2018 U.S. gross domestic product. Regarding healthcare, I'd like to bring up two recent cases that are relevant to our topic today. So first, there's a Fortune 500 company with over 90,000 employees that's been impacted by a cyber incident. The company provided no details about the incident, but people posting to an online Reddit forum who identified themselves as employees said that the Change network was hit by a ransomware attack overnight this past Sunday. This echoed the alarm of a clinician at one of the hospital facilities in Washington, D.C., who described to the Associated Press as, quote, a mad scramble, including anxiety over determining which patients might be infected with the virus that causes COVID-19. There was a senior cybersecurity advisor to the American Hospital Association that added that criminals have been increasingly targeting the networks of healthcare institutions during the coronavirus pandemic. That is still ongoing. The other case earlier this month, this is significant. The first known fatality related to ransomware occurred in Düsseldorf, Germany, after an attack caused IT systems to fail and a critically ill patient needing urgent admission died after she had to be taken to another city for treatment.
Wow, and with that, it is time for 2 quick questions for you all. First, have you personally been the victim of a ransomware attack? And has your organization been the victim of a ransomware attack?
So we have our polling pods up, so if you can go ahead and provide your inputs, we'd kind of like to get the pulse of the audience to see who has been victims. And we're seeing that this is good. A lot of folks have no personal experience or business experience with ransomware. But we do see some folks, their organization has been a victim. Good to see that nobody specifically personally has been impacted. Good, a lot of results in. Good, that's an encouraging result that for our audience that we have now, that there hasn't been a ton of experience with ransomware attacks either on the personal or business level. Great. We will continue on. So looking at the signs of ransomware, while the attacks are serious, they are also pretty easy to identify. The typical signs are: 1, your web browser or desktop is locked with a message telling you how to pay to unlock your system. Your file directories could also contain a ransom note file that is usually a .txt file. Or secondly, all your files have a new atypical file extension appended to the file names. Examples of these extensions are .abc, .xxx, .crypto, or even we've seen .omg! Third, the ransomware screens often display intimidating messages. Authors of ransomware benefit from instilling fear and panic into their victims to make them more likely to pay the ransom or click on a link that exposes the user's system to infection. Examples of these messages include things like saying, your computer has been infected with a virus, click here to resolve the issue. Or it could say your computer was used to visit websites with illegal content. To unlock your computer, you must pay a $100 fine. Or the message would say, all the files on your computer have been encrypted. You must pay this ransom within 72 hours to regain access to your data.
I think we can all hear how alarming this is, but what can we do about it?
So, great question. CISA has created an insights doc that lays out some great prevention and mitigation steps. So we'll go over what some of those are here. So this is through the CISA Insights, Cyber Insight series. The guidelines can help everyone to avoid becoming that next ransomware victim. And organizations should take responsibility to ensure that IT staff and management and organizational leadership are all working together to follow these best practices. So some actions for today, making sure that you're not tomorrow's headline. Number 1, back up your data. Back up your data, back up your data. This includes system images, configurations, and keep those backups offline. It cannot be understated how important it is to maintain backups of your files. That way, if attackers lock up your data, you can easily revert to the backup files and not worry about losing whatever was encrypted. However, you must keep backup copies off of your network and test them before reinstalling to ensure they have not been infected by the malware. Otherwise, you may simply be restoring your system with the ransomware still on it. For organizations with especially critical or sensitive data, it's recommended to secure, quote, weapons-grade system backups. That is, backups stored in a secure location, disconnected from internet access, and shielded from physical disasters or EMP interference. Second is to update and patch systems. commonly known as patch management. This ensures critical vulnerabilities have been identified, that they are mitigated. 3 is making sure your security solutions and processes are up to date. As with patch management, ensure your security solutions are patched and updated to mitigate the known vulnerabilities. 4 is review and practice your incident response plan at least annually. If you don't have a plan, create one. Ensure your organization keeps it up to date and tests it so everyone knows their roles, the responsibilities, and the processes that ensure effective incident response. And last but not least, pay attention to global ransomware events and apply lessons learned from others' experiences. As just stated, attacks are happening everywhere and often, all the time. Sometimes the best defense is learning from somebody else's mistakes. So maintain that situational awareness to stay ahead of the hackers. Some actions to recover if impacted. Ask for help. Contact CISA, FBI, Secret Service, or local law enforcement. They can bring the resources to bear and provide the expert guidance on specific attack types, which they may well have encountered already. Second, work with experienced cybersecurity advisors to help in your response and recovery. Ideally, identify these advisors in your response plan before an incident occurs so you don't lose time once you're facing the attack. Isolate the affected machines and systems to prevent the infection from scaling and phase your return to operations to ensure systems are working as expected. Review the connections of any business partners that touch your network, including customers, partners, and vendors, to identify any upstream or downstream viral impacts. And lastly, apply business impact assessment findings to prioritize your recovery. This essentially examines the interdependencies surrounding your business and informs which aspects are most critical in order to effectively triage those recovery efforts. So some actions to secure your environment going forward. Practice good cyber hygiene. That's backups, update patches, whitelist applications, limit privileges, and use multi-factor authentication. 2, segment your networks. It's making it hard for the bad guy to move around and affect multiple systems. Develop network containment strategies. So if the bad guys get in, make it hard for them to get stuff out of it. Know your system's baseline for recovery. This is including your recovery point objective, which informs how often you should back up systems. The recovery time objective, which informs how much time you have to respond to an incident before continuity of business is significantly impacted. And then lastly, review disaster recovery procedures with executives and validate those goals. The U.S. government provides a response framework in an interagency technical guidance document titled How to Protect Your Networks from Ransomware. The summary of key ransomware best responses includes the following. 1, isolate the infected computer immediately. Infected systems should be removed from the network as soon as possible to prevent ransomware from attacking network or shared drives. Isolate or power off affected devices that have not yet been completely corrupted. This may afford more time to clean and recover data, contain the damage, and prevent conditions from worsening. Immediately secure that backup data or systems by taking them offline if they're not already offline. Ensure the backups are free of malware. Contact law enforcement immediately. You're strongly encouraged to contact local field office of the FBI or the U.S. Secret Service immediately upon discovery to report a ransomware event and request their assistance. If available, collect and secure partial portions of the ransom data that might exist through backups. And if possible, change all online account passwords and network passwords after removing the system from the network. Additionally, change all system passwords once the malware is removed. And then lastly, delete registry values and files to stop an infected program from loading. In terms of recovery, it can be a difficult process that may require the services of a reputable data recovery specialist. Some victims do pay to recover their files. However, U.S. government does not encourage paying a ransom to criminal actors, and there are serious risks to weigh before paying. Consider the following factors. Paying a ransom does not guarantee an organization will regain access to their data. In fact, some individuals were never provided decryption keys after paying the ransom. Some victims who paid the demand were targeted again by cyber actors. After paying the originally demanded ransom, some victims were asked to pay more to get the promised decryption key. Most notably, paying encourages this criminal business model and incentivizes the growth of these attacks. So if your organization is attacked, implement your security incident response and business continuity plans. Ideally, organizations will ensure they have appropriate backup procedures, so their response to an attack will simply be to restore the data from a known, clean backup. Secure network backups eliminate the need to pay a ransom to recover data.
Thanks, Joe. Now that we've gone over the basics of ransomware, let's pivot to look at a few real-world examples of ransomware attacks. We'll look at 3 different scenarios to understand their impacts, what each organization did to respond, and how they were able to recover and prevent future attacks. First is a large global logistics company, then an attack on a major U.S. newspaper, and finally an attack against a large U.S. city. So, Joe, can you walk us through those?
Absolutely, will do. So let's look at first, which is the global logistics company. They got caught up in one of the biggest ransomware attacks to date. In June of 2017, a major shipping corporation was hit with a ransomware attack that brought their normal operations to its knees for nearly 10 days. The company was not the direct target of the attack, but was simply collateral damage in an attack designed by foreign state actors targeting another state. In this case, specifically, it was Russia versus the Ukraine. So what was the threat and how did this company become a victim? The malicious software was called NotPetya. It gained entry into the company's network through accounting software called MEDOC. This is Ukraine's equivalent to TurboTax or Quicken. In fact, NotPetya gained entry and compromised over 80% of Ukrainian businesses through the same accounting platform. Russian military hackers hijacked MEDOC, which is the accounting software. They hijacked their update servers to access a hidden backdoor into thousands of PCs that had the software installed. So NotPetya used 2 exploits working in tandem, Eternal Blue and Mimikatz. Eternal Blue, which was created by the National Security Agency but later leaked by a hacker group, takes advantage of a vulnerability in a particular Windows protocol. It's allowing hackers to remotely run their code on any unpatched machine. This vulnerability was exploitable for a year, from March of 2016 to March of 2017, and was also exploited by the WannaCry malware. Mimikatz, developed as a proof of concept, could pull Windows users' passwords out of RAM and use them to hack into other machines accessible with the same credentials. Prior to NotPetya, Microsoft had released a patch for the Eternal Blue vulnerability. However, given the combination of Eternal Blue and Mimikatz, attackers could infect computers that were not patched and then steal those passwords from those machines to infect the patched computers. While NotPetya presented itself as ransomware, its goal was purely destructive, something known as wipeware, and it irreversibly encrypted computers' master boot records. Software at gate terminals went dead at the shipping company, effectively paralyzing their shipping operations at terminals across the globe. Corporate losses soared beyond $300 million, even with the company reverting back to manual processes over the course of the attack and the recovery. This figure doesn't even consider the downstream effects to other businesses dependent upon that global logistics company. With that company, within the company alone, the malware compromised 50,000 endpoints and thousands of applications across servers across 600 sites in over 130 countries. The White House has estimated total damages of over $10 billion across all of NotPetya's victims.
Wow, $10 billion? That is an incredible amount of financial loss. Are criminals like this ever caught?
Generally, no. As many times there may be nation states that are identified. Sometimes the groups are identified, but many times the actual individuals are not caught. It depends on the attack type. So, how was this attack identified? There were messages on user screens in red and black lettering that read either, quote, repairing file system on C, or it would say, oops, your important files are encrypted. It then demanded $300 worth of Bitcoin in order to decrypt the files. Some of the infected computers spontaneously restarted, and in 7 minutes, NotPetya infected the entire network of the global shipping giant. So how is this mitigated? Employees scrambled to turn off computers or disconnect them from the network, resorting to manually unplugging machines to remove them from the network. The company's entire global network was disconnected within 2 hours of the initial indications of the attack. Now, it should be noted that while no specific number has been reported, it's safe to assume that a fair portion of that 2 hours was spent sharing information and simply getting the word out. This aspect of immediate incident response is still being addressed in the cybersecurity industry. In terms of the recovery, this relied heavily on human resilience. It turns out that openness and transparency was critical to effective recovery. The company converted 2 floors of their building in a 24/7 emergency operations center in order to rebuild the company's global network. A consultant staff of 200 people was hired to manage the operations along 400 of the corporate staff, who went into every electronics store in the area to buy piles of new laptops and Wi-Fi hotspots. The IT staff located backups of almost all of the individual servers, dating from between 3 to 7 days prior to NotPetya's onset. But no one could find a backup for one crucial layer of the company's network, which was its domain controllers. These are the servers that function as a detailed map of the corporate network and set the basic rules that determine which users are allowed to access which systems. So after a frantic global search for this, the admins finally found one single surviving domain controller backup in a remote office in Ghana. Now, by chance, this had been knocked offline by a power outage, pure coincidence. Therefore, it remained disconnected from the network during the attack. So one staffer from the Ghana office flew to meet another employee, and in the airport, they did the handoff of the very precious hard drive. That staffer then boarded 6.5-hour flight back to Heathrow, carrying this keystone to the entire recovery process. So about 2 weeks after the attack, the network had finally reached a point where the company could begin reissuing personal computers to most of their staff. They lined up computers on dining tables as help desk staff walked down the rows inserting USB drives and clicking through prompts for hours to set up the computers. It did take just 10 days for the company to rebuild its entire network of 4,000 servers and 45,000 personal computers. Now, the full recovery took far longer. Some staffers continued to work around the clock for the next 2 months to rebuild the entire corporate software setup. So in the wake of this attack, IT staffers say that practically every single security feature that they've asked for has been almost immediately approved. Not surprising. Multi-factor authentication has been rolled out across the company, along with a long-delayed upgrade to Windows 10.
Okay, given the extraordinary difficulties experienced by the response and recovery team in this scenario, it does beg the question, do your organizations have plans in place in the event of a ransomware attack? We'll bring up the module for you.
Out of the gate, it looks like a lot of folks do have a plan in place. It's fantastic. And the numbers getting higher. That's good. Clearly, ransomware has been around a while now, and with the emphasis on cybersecurity, it's not only encouraging but not surprising to see that so many of you, your organizations, do have a plan in place for ransomware. Phenomenal. Excellent. So we will move on to our next slide. So our second case study looks at an attack against a major U.S. publishing company. In December of 2018, a ransomware attack disrupted the distribution of multiple major newspapers affiliated with the publishing company. The attackers responsible used the malware Rook in an attack designed to disable infrastructure, specifically the publishing company's servers, and then shut down production at some publications for a full day. The malware is usually dropped into a system by other malware, or it gains access to a system using remote desktop services, their protocol vulnerabilities. Once it's inside the network, it automatically spreads from computer to computer or node to node, encrypting files along the way. So Rook took advantage of weak privilege management. When servers were brought back online to recover from the infection, security patches failed to hold, and then the ransomware began to reinfect the network. Servers used for news production and manufacturing processes were infected, delaying the production of multiple national newspapers, in some cases by a full day, which in the newspaper business is catastrophic. Investigators believe the attack was meant to disable infrastructure, not to steal data. So how is this attack identified? The initial problem appeared to be a server outage. That evening, however, editors were unable to transmit digital files of finished pages of the newspaper to the printing facility. They were locked out of the system and forced to perform workarounds. When IT staff investigated the issue, they quickly found that attempting to view the files containing the news content instead showed a ransom note demanding Bitcoin in exchange for decrypting the data. Screenshots of affected company files show a ransom note titled Rook README. So how was this attack mitigated? Once it was identified, programmers immediately started working to quarantine the affected systems and reboot the servers. However, some of the patches installed to secure the network did not hold, and the ransomware virus began to reinfect the network, impacting a series of servers used for news production and manufacturing. It took a full day for security staff to shut down, patch, and then bring the servers back into production, clear of the virus. In terms of recovery, staff worked around the clock to get the publishing company's network back up and running within 24 hours. However, the lost time meant some newspapers affiliated with the publishing company that missed that day's reporting. Investigation of the incident identified weak privilege management as the core vulnerability that enabled the attack. To remediate this, security administrators enforced least privilege principles on the network endpoints and ensured credential theft protection to actively shield against the malware. And then finally, let's look at a scenario that impacted a government agency serving millions of citizens. In 2018, a hacking group targeted government agencies and companies across the United States using the ransomware variant commonly known as SamSam. By the end of that year, the FBI had estimated that this group responsible for these attacks had received over $6 million in ransom payments, and they had caused $30 million in total reported damages. One of these attacks was against the government of a major U.S. city, with the perpetrators demanding over $50,000 in Bitcoin to restore services, which officials did refuse to pay. Over one-third of city offices, including essential services, were seriously impacted for over 5 days due to the attack. So how did this virus infiltrate critical government infrastructure? The group used a brute force attack to guess at weak passwords until a match was found, and exploited a vulnerability which was unknown to developers at the time in the Microsoft Remote Desktop Protocol, which allows users to control machines remotely. Due to the architecture of this Remote Desktop Protocol, the controls set in place to prevent brute force attacks were not installed. The hackers escalated privileges to ensure that they had access to encrypt files critical to the city government's business processes, resulting in a particularly damaging attack. In other words, threat actors identified weak passwords from a normal user account, which were then used to escalate privileges to access highly sensitive files and servers. The vulnerabilities exploited were a combination of infrastructure weakness and user error in the form of using weak passwords that were cracked using brute force methods.
Wow, so all of this could have been prevented with a strong password. And what happened as a result?
So 5 of the city's 13 government departments were locked down, including law enforcement, courts, and public utilities. The police department had to write incident reports by hand, contributing to lost time and the likelihood of increased errors. The attack forced manual processing of cases at the municipal court and stopped online or in-person payment of tickets, water bills, and business license and renewals, just to name a few. Years of data meant to be secured in the government network were lost, including a great deal of criminal evidence and the police department's dashcam footage archive. The city spent over $2.6 million on emergency efforts, with some reports claiming the actual costs were much, much higher. So let's apply the RMR framework one more time to understand what happened in this scenario. Identification. The city's Department of Information Management first saw outages on numerous internal and customer-facing applications, including online bill pay and court records. The IT department sent out emails to city employees instructing them to unplug their computers if they observed anything suspicious going on. What was done to mitigate the attack? The city immediately shut down much of its network to try and control the situation and implemented manual workarounds where possible to continue services. Finally, how did the city recover? City officials quickly reached out to the FBI, DHS, the Secret Service, and experts in the private sector, including SecureWorks, Microsoft, and Cisco. These partners worked with staff from the city's Information Management Department to identify the threat and its magnitude and to protect the network perimeter. However, full recovery was not a fast process. 6 months after the attack, a third of the city's software and applications remained impacted.
Okay, that is really helpful info, Joe. So this concludes the scenario portion of the webinar. Now we'll finish up today by walking through a quick knowledge check and review some of the core concepts and takeaways from this course. We'll cover 5 multiple choice questions. When the question is read, do make a note of your answer, and afterwards, and after a few moments, we'll discuss the correct answer. So follow along and let's see how you do. In the first question, which describes the typical way ransomware is spread? A floppy disk, sharing passwords, phishing emails, or using a VPN?
All right, looks like everybody's been paying attention. Phishing emails, 100%. And that is great to see. So the answer, yes, is phishing emails. A 2016 report showed that 93% of all phishing emails contained ransomware, which is a pretty astonishing figure.
Excellent. So for the next question, common indicators of a ransomware attack include all of the following except your desktop is locked with a message displaying how to unlock it. Your files have new file extensions appended to the file names. Your network is running extremely slow, or you're prompted with a notification claiming your computer has been infected with a virus and you must click to resolve the issue.
So, it's like a lot of folks think that it's C. There's a lot of bad things in this list that we probably wouldn't want to see. But looks like we have most folks responding in. The majority are C, and that is correct. The nature of ransomware typically means indicators are much more overt. Extremely lethargic system response may be the result of either non-threatening technical issues or some sort of different type of hacking attack.
Next question. What measures can you take to help prevent becoming a casualty of ransomware? Backing up your data, update and patch your systems, ensure your security solutions are up to date, or all of the above?
This audience is hot out of the gate. Everybody went right to thinking this is all the above. And everybody's jumping on that one. There is no fooling people. That is correct. All of the above. As per the CISA recommendation, offline data backup, patch management, and currency of active security solutions are among the most effective ways to prevent or mitigate the impacts of a ransomware attack. Great job.
Which of the following is not a priority during immediate ransomware response? Isolate infected computers, create a ransomware incident response plan, secure backup data or systems, and contacting law enforcement.
We have most folks going with the incident response plan, some folks with law enforcement. A lot of responses in. Answer is B. So while creating an incident response plan is extremely important, it should be completed prior to the attack or in the recovery phase after an attack. Immediate response should focus on those more tactical activities.
And finally, true or false? Paying a ransom will ensure that your systems, devices, and data are decrypted.
Everybody apparently thinks this one is false. And everybody is paying attention. Answer is false. Paying the ransom does not guarantee an organization will regain access to their data. In fact, as we stated, some might pay only to have the attackers ask for even more money than originally requested. So you're making yourself an easy mark in many cases. Great. So in closing, let's remember that ransomware has been continually evolving over 30 years and can impact everybody. So in order to avoid being the next statistic, here are a few key takeaways from today's presentation. One is to practice good cyber hygiene. Back up your data, system images, and configurations on a regular basis and keep those backups offline. Make sure your security solutions are up to date. Update software and operating systems with the latest patches. Outdated applications and operating systems are the target of most attacks. Use application whitelisting to only allow approved programs to run on your network. Restrict users' permissions to install and run software applications, and apply the principle of least privilege to all systems and services. Employ multi-factor authentication to add an additional layer of security, making it harder for the bad actors to log in as if they were you. Follow safe practices when browsing the internet. And never click on links or open attachments in unsolicited emails. Enable strong spam filters to prevent phishing emails from reaching end users in the first place, and authenticate inbound email to prevent email spoofing. Second major point is review and practice your incident response plan at least annually. If you don't have a plan, again, create one. Ensure your organization keeps it up to date and test it so everyone knows roles and responsibilities and the processes that ensure effective incident response. Lastly, pay attention to those global ransomware events and apply the lessons learned from others' experiences. These attacks, as we stated, are happening everywhere. We just saw 2 that I had referenced that occurred within the past week. Sometimes the best defense is learning from others' mistakes. Maintain that situational awareness to stay ahead of the enemies. This concludes our IMR 101 webinar. We hope you've enjoyed the webinar and come away with knowledge that helps you better protect yourself and your organization from these sorts of threats. So if you want to learn more, we encourage you to visit the resources listed here on the slide. They include US CERT website for ransomware, the Interagency Ransomware Response document used to outline the response section of this course, and the Center for Internet Security's information on ransomware. Also, not on the slide, but certainly notable, there's another resource that was just released this week. CISA announced the release of their joint ransomware guide developed in coordination with the CISA, which is the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. This ransomware guide is now available on CISA's website, CISA.gov/publication/ransomware guide. The resource was developed with a target audience of state, local, tribal, and territorial governments and small to mid-sized businesses, but it's widely applicable for all CISA partners. So that's definitely worth a look. Thank you for your participation today. We really appreciate it. There is a certificate of completion available for download as well. So with that, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.